You say goodbye, and I say hello. Hello, hello. I don't know why you say goodbye. I say hello. Hello, hello.
Hi everyone, my name is Alexander Severa. I'm the Administrative Assistant for the Humanities Program, and I'm here today with Noah Brackett, who is a music tech major and a humanities minor here at UNCA, graduating this semester. How are you doing today?
I'm doing all right. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. So yeah, it's so great to talk to you. We've talked before, but it's good to get you sitting down. We really just want to kind of just highlight your accomplishments and your kind of unique perspective on things as it relates to music, music technology, and the humanities program. So I just want to give. So firstly, I wanted to give an idea of who you are first. To folks in the audience. So, what drew you to music technology, and what drew you to music, and what drew you to music technology at UNCA?
Yeah, so I grew up in a very musical family. My dad has a PhD in musicology. He was a performance major in undergrad, but that gradually turned into a musicology degree. My brother actually went to UNC Asheville, and he got 2 degrees, one of them being a bachelor's in music. So music was always just kind of something I grew up around. I guess I can say it was like kind of innate. I don't know how true that is, or people being like innately musical, or rather, learned. But yeah, it was always just something I kind of grew up around. It was always something I was very interested in. Guitar was kind of my first step into music, learning how to play guitar. And that eventually led to, kind of creating my own stuff, being interested in more of the production side. And I could flex that muscle through programs like GarageBand, which is a DAW, digital audio workstation. When I got really good with those, I graduated to Logic, which is kind of Apple's next step. It's like the professional version. And yeah, I was mainly self-taught. YouTube was like a huge resource, just learning how to do certain things, how to achieve certain sounds. And I knew I wanted to do that beyond just as a hobby. I really wanted to study it. And UNC Asheville was one of the only schools that offered music technology. And Asheville just has such a great music scene and culture anyways. It seemed like a no-brainer. So when I got in, I got a little bit of scholarship money as well. And it was just like, yeah. That's it.
Especially talking about Asheville, this is where Moog synthesizers used to be, so there is that sort of.
Still is. Yeah.
Oh, it still is? I thought they closed down.
They moved, maybe to Weaverville, I want to say, but they're still in the area. Yeah.
Okay, interesting, because it's like I'm thinking about Asheville. When I heard about Asheville, I heard about the music scene. So coming here to a place, say, that has from what I've heard, a great music scene, being able to teach here. I didn't know that the UNCA was one of the few schools in the UNC system to offer music technology.
Yeah.
It's really interesting.
Yeah, and I think Moog is partially responsible for that. Moog did teach here when he was still alive briefly in the 90s, which is really, really cool. And we reaped the benefit of that, of having the Moog synthesizer room, which is...
That still exists today?
Yeah, and it's full of thousands of dollars worth of equipment that I would never be able to touch otherwise. Yeah, so very, very lucky in that regard. Also, the people who unfortunately don't work here anymore, Dr. Kirby is also someone who really built that program up and made it what it is. And we have great faculty now. Jude Weinberg and Carolina Perez are the 2 main faculty, and I've had a wonderful time working with them in my 4 years.
I had another question then as it relates, because you were talking about you found music was something you always grew up in, found it just a very kind of connected with it as a way to express yourself. I was kind of curious then, in music technology, how do you find ways to, in the synthesization of music, the editing of music, the construction, the managing of sound equipment, how do you find ways to express yourself in that space?
Yeah, there's a number of different ways that you can kind of go about that. I would say the easiest way is in the studio. Not even as the artist, but even taking on more of a production and an engineering role. The people who are responsible for setting up microphones, achieving certain sounds that the artist wants is very creative. You have to be creative, and you have to know how to maneuver the studio to get those certain sounds that you want. An artist might be like, I want my album to sound like Nirvana. I want it to sound like Nevermind. You kind of have to know what that sound is, how to get there, and what techniques you have to use, which just is innately creative. Away from the studio, working in live sound, I'd say is a little less creative because, at least my philosophy for that is being like efficient and like getting the best sound possible, the quickest you can, making the band happy. You know, live entertainment's a lot different than like studio entertainment, but you still have to be creative. You have to be a creative problem solver. You have to be creative in the way that you make certain things sound, how all rooms sound different, right? So when you're setting up microphones, you have to know how to, what's the word? Adjust for the situation you're in, what type of room you're in. I'd say, you can be creative in the studio, and then a lot of problem solving is super creative. Yeah.
And you mentioned in your earlier years being kind of self-taught in a lot of ways, especially from YouTube, and being one of the only sort of campuses that actually has a music tech program, thanks to our associations with Moog in the past. Obviously, we're at the sort of cutting edge of music technology. I was kind of curious then, you've obviously probably have seen ways in which music technology has changed, both while here and since you were a kid. I was kind of curious then in some ways you'd say music technology has changed in recent years, decades.
Yeah. Prior to my time, everything was recorded on magnetic tape, and a lot of people still prefer it that way. It's more expensive, it's a little harder to work with, but it does have a certain sound. From my time here, the biggest change I've seen is incorporating AI into music making. And for me, one of the craziest things I've seen with that is AI mastering. Do you know what mastering is? When you master a track?
I wouldn't say I do.
So when you're done with a mix of a song, when it's all final, you send it off to get mastered. And basically what that is the very final touches put into the song, balancing levels and equalization and making it loud enough for streaming, but not too loud. The company called iZotope, and Apple does this as well, has their own programs where AI can analyze a song, read all of its data, and master it into a way that it seems it'll best be served, which to me is kind of insane because usually mastering engineers are very, very particular about how they master things. There's very, very famous mastering engineers who get put on big albums and big projects, and it's almost kind of like their own little like forms of witchcraft where they have like their own techniques and stuff that they only keep to themselves and stuff. But to see like AI coming in, I wouldn't say I'm necessarily scared of those jobs disappearing because I think people will always prefer humans to be involved in their creative projects, but it is really crazy to see how well these machines can make these songs sound. Yeah, and it's not even like creative in the way that it's like putting in notes and creating songs, but just making them sound professional. It is really interesting to me. Yeah.
And you kind of mentioned it, sort of keeping things loud enough for streaming, but not too loud.
Yeah.
I think that kind of also sort of gives us a view into how not only how we create music, but how we experience, and I don't want to say consume music, that makes it sound too vulgar. The way we experience music has also changed drastically. I mean, at least over the course of my life.
For sure.
I mean, I haven't bought a physical CD in maybe 10 years.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then thinking of that, I mean, I think music tech does a fantastic job, I think, of demonstrating this social context that goes into not delivering, but like a song showing up on your playlist, right? I mean, songs just don't pop out of thin air. It's not just the sort of singular vision of a singular artist, right? There's dozens of technicians, master technicians, as you've discussed, mastering, refining the sound, working on all aspects of it. And I think that social context is interesting to investigate as it relates to music. And so getting to that, so I was curious as well then, since we've talked about your music tech major, I was curious then, why a humanities minor attached to that?
Yeah, so I always knew I wanted to do a minor at UNCA. I was initially off-put a little bit by how busy I was being a music tech major. It is incredibly intensive. My grad plan looks insane when I show it to people. But I managed to finish what I needed to finish music-wise in 3.5 semesters, or not 3.5 semesters, 3.5 years. So I had 1 extra semester, and I was looking at what maybe I could fill my last semester with. And at first I was looking at a history minor, which was a little too much. But the humanities minor was the second one I looked at, and it immediately caught my eye because not only did it encompass things that I found interesting, like, you know, kind of like culture, like sociology, you know, literature, but it allowed me to kind of formulate it in my own way. And I think that's what really did it is I was able to choose 4 classes that kind of had a common theme, present it to my advisor, and they could either say yes or no. And I was lucky enough that they said yes. And it could fit just within that 1 semester.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's what
That sounds
drew me to it.
very, that sounds almost very like, very towards the original goal and vision of the university, right? I mean,
Yeah, for sure.
You're
Yeah,
going just
totally.
beyond like root memorization. You're going towards this is what I want to learn. This is how I want to understand the world. So I was kind
Yeah.
of curious then, do you felt that those classes and the humanities minor enhanced your experience of your music tech major?
Like the humanities classes I've taken.
Humanities classes you've taken and then also adding on a humanities minor, yeah.
In a way, I wouldn't say strictly in the way where I'm applying things I learned in humanities to when I'm in the studio or whatnot. I mean, I don't know what I would learn in humanities that would come up in like while I'm trying to record someone. But in the whole scope of music, certainly. I love learning about the cultural aspects of music and history and whatnot, and I think everything is intertwined in kind of its own way. So by reading philosophy and literature and historical events that I hadn't known before I got to college, I feel like everything kind of fits together in a way. And just the ways that you're challenged to think in humanities-driven classes, I think are applicable in any class. You know, just the way that you go about things, the way that you problem solve. I've found myself thinking differently since I've taken humanities classes.
Yeah, and it comes to mind when you were just talking about sort of the sort of people that when they master a soundtrack, they try to go for a specific sound,
Yeah.
right? And I think not just like, you know, you listen to a Nirvana track, you listen to the Beatles, you're not just listening to, you know, you're not just listening to the Beatles, but you're also trying to listen to the world that the Beatles existed within, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, totally.
In our
And that's why
conversation,
people love the Beatles. And like, I mean, that it's not just John, Paul, George, and Ringo. I mean, they always say the 5th Beatle is George Martin, who was their producer, because he was able to get these performances out of them. He was able to get their sound at that like perfect level where it just resonated with so many people. And I think people realize that, but casual listeners might not realize the amount of work that is put in to achieve those types of sounds, you know?
And yeah, and we were talking before the show, or before the interview here today, you were talking about sort of the social context of the Beatles, right? Now, it wasn't just, it was the music, but it was also that they, as you kind of talked about, they were drawing on the legacy of Elvis. They were one of the, I mean, I think you would say, I don't know if you would agree with this, but they're one of the first sort of big international, like boy bands, first big international band. They brought a new type of sort of fad culture. So I think, like sort of going on what you said, yeah, like the, you know, social context of music is extremely important.
Yeah.
And I was kind of curious then, do you have any artists, both like historically and now, that you feel are important, not just the development of sort of modern music, but modern music technology?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. I mean, the Beatles actually themselves were, they were really, really important in the development of certain musical, I don't know what to call it, I guess studio techniques and advancing aspects of music technology. Their engineers that they had and producers, Jeff Emmerich, and George Martin and Alan Parsons, who went on to work with Pink Floyd and even started his own band, Alan Parsons Project. They were very, very integral in creating a lot of techniques that we still use. More modern bands, growing up, I was obsessed with the band Nine Inch Nails because the way that they blended electronic music and also like hard rock and metal just kind of blew my mind as a kid. Them and I would say Frank Ocean, which is a complete left turn, were the two artists that really, really made me want to create my own music. When Blonde came out, it was one of those albums that immediately just resonated with me because I'd never heard anything that sounded like it. Beyond amazing songs, like the album has such a specific sound. And, you know, I don't know if it's ironically or coincidentally, but I mean, the Beatles recorded all of the material at Abbey Road Studios. It was called EMI, but changed to Abbey Road. Major portions of Blonde were also recorded at Abbey Road Studios, so maybe it's just some magic in the studio, but
Something in the water.
yeah, something in the water there, I guess. But yeah, I think for me, those two artists were super influential in the way that I kind of approach music making and music technology. But there are so many artists who push the limits of what is possible. Electronic music, do you know who Aphex Twin is? Have you heard of him? Richard D. James, he is a super influential pioneer of like electronic dance music. And he was really kind of on the cusp of really early computer technology and utilizing that to create his music, like late 90s, early 2000s, similar to kind of like Radiohead.
I didn't know Radiohead.
Yeah, and what they could achieve in the early 2000s with like Kid A and Amnesiac. I could ramble on for a long time about
you're
this,
okay.
but yeah. A lot of those artists are super influential in me, and I think part of that is what they were able to achieve in the studio by pushing boundaries. Yeah.
I wanted to circle back to you talked about your humanities minor earlier, and you found 4 classes and you presented them to your advisor.
Yeah.
I was kind of curious, what were those 4 classes?
Well, initially, they were a movie class, Medieval Hollywood, which dealt with medieval tropes in not even Hollywood, just movies in general. It was a Grateful Dead history class, International Global Studies, Introduction to International Global Studies, I think is what it was called, and a mass comm film class. That was rejected because the Grateful Dead class was a music class, technically undergrad plan, and for my minor, I couldn't take any music classes, which was super unfortunate on my behalf because I really wanted to take that Grateful Dead class, and I felt like it fit like perfectly in what I wanted to get out of the humanities minor, but I switched that one out with art history, which I find interesting as well, and that was my second try, and they said yes to those.
That's sort of a large breadth of classes as well.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I was just trying to like encompass everything that I could.
No, honestly, it makes me so. As you know, I was a student here. I graduated last May, so honestly, it makes me wish I took a humanities minor because it would be because I didn't have for some reason I didn't take a minor, but there's so much like stuff I wanted to learn here that wasn't along the sort of rigid do this for your minor.
Yeah,
and I was already taking a very interdisciplinary major. I was an anthropology major, but just having that option, right, while you're in school, while you have this ability, while you're on this like campus, while you have all these fantastic professors, being able to take just things that interest you and things that you want to use to just enhance not only your career, of course, but enhance also your just understanding of the world, I think is very important.
Yeah.
I didn't know the Grateful Dead class. That does sound interesting.
Yeah.
I wish I took.
Yeah.
That sounds really fun.
I took I forget what the actual class is called, but it was a Beatles class that concerned the history and kind of their cultural impact and the music, of course, and that's taught by Dr. Brian Felix, who also teaches the Grateful Dead one and is one of my absolute favorite professors. I've known him a while because he knew my father and then he knew my brother. And yeah, he all the classes I've taken with him and ensembles, I've played guitar, in one of his jazz ensembles and taking some music classes. They've been so great. Yeah, he's a fantastic professor.
No, I have. Honestly, I feel like one of the biggest draws to me for UNCA is the professors. I don't feel like I feel like that the professors are really where it shines, especially because, I mean, especially in any major, especially in majors like music tech, where these are often going to be, at least as I understand it, people that have been in the workforce doing music technology or have like sort of hands-on experience with music technology.
Yeah.
Or like in my case with anthropology, I found that all of my professors were people that have gone out into the field and done anthropology.
Of course.
I feel like that's
Yeah.
super valuable. And so as a student here at UNCA, you did go through your 4 classes and senior capstone for humanities. So I kind of wanted to touch on those a little bit. I wanted to just ask straight up, was there any authors or books or papers that you found were really sort of enriching, really sort of helpful to positioning yourself, or just something that really spoke to you?
Yeah, I saw that question, and I was thinking back. One of my favorite semesters of humanities I had was Humanities 3 with Professor Lundblad, who has since retired. Absolute, probably one of top 5 professors I've had at UNCA. He was so good, and he played guitar. So I used to stay behind in class and talk about guitar with him, like almost every class. I really loved the readings that he took them from the humanities reader, but the way that he would talk through them with the class made sure everyone was on the same page and just allow kind of this Socratic type of talking and just everyone sharing their own opinions was fantastic. But if I had to choose one piece of writing that I still go back to a lot is in Humanities 2, Professor Williams, Dr. Williams.
I took them too.
Yeah. Hard class, I'm not going to lie, especially because I took it over the summer, so I was reading like hundreds of pages of stuff a day on top of working. But he introduced me to this ancient Chinese poet named Po Chuai. I absolutely fell in love with that poetry. I thought it was like just so vivid and so beautifully written. And I loved going over that in class, and I saved that PDF, and I still look at it every once in a while when I need to cool out on my computer, you know, grinding on assignments. Sometimes I just need to like reach back into the Po Chuai folder and read some poetry.
Honestly, yeah. I have a similar experience. I really enjoyed in my humanities I really enjoyed Al-Ghazali's Deliverance from Error.
And that I still have that by my my bedstand back home. In Chapel Hill, I have the Al-Ghazali, and every once in a while I'll go through and just kind of revisit it.
Well, it's interesting because I feel like a lot of people might come to the classes being like, well, these people are thousands of years old. What can I possibly gain? And then you read them, and once you get through the differences in alliteration and language and so on,
Yeah.
you're like, these are people that are helping me with stuff I have now. Like I
Yeah.
found Al-Ghazali's like, how do I know what I know? And why do people feel so animate about what they know?
Yeah.
And what is our way out of that? I thought it was very impactful to me in my anthropology education. So
Yeah. Did you ever take a class with Trabulsi, Dr. Trabulsi?
I did my LA 478 with Dr. Trabulsi
Yeah.
International.
I love
Citizenship.
Trabulsi. He's a fantastic professor too. And he said something in our medieval Hollywood class that I feel like works with what you just said, where there's a misconception that ancient people are stupid. And that's just not true. You know, and that's like, we didn't get to the point where we are now because people just suddenly knew how to create a computer. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
yeah. It's
And,
like, yeah, they couldn't Google everything, but they weren't dumb.
No.
Yeah.
No. They were suited for their time, their social
Exactly.
context, right?
Yeah.
I remember, I'm drawn back to, I remember when I took 124, oh gosh, that was like nearly half a decade ago. I think it was actually with Jacob Butera, I want to say. And we were talking about ancient cultures, and especially one that's the wheel. Well, the wheel's kind of considered this important advancement, and it's interesting, of course, because it's often used, the wheel is often used as like, this is the sign of an advanced culture, right? And I think it's interesting that then many cultures that didn't broadly use the wheel for transport, they still use the wheel, like for example, the Mayans. We found archaeological evidence that the Mayans actually did have the wheel. They used it for toys. And the reason that archaeologists posit is because they didn't need the wheel, or it didn't. Not only did they not need the wheel, but it wasn't. It didn't make sense in the terrain that the Mayan civilization existed in, heavily wooded, large valleys and mountains. And so it really reframes, I guess, how we look at the past and how we look at each other and how we look at society and history as not so much like this linear path towards a single thing, but instead like sort of adaptation and sort of making what we can with the circumstances we're given, how we adapt to that. And I think that's really interesting. I think that's also, you go back to music technology. I really think music technology or music in general is a good example of that, right? I mean, people make instruments and using what they have around them, using certain the cultural context they exist within, right? I mean, like as you said, we don't just wake up today and have a computer, right? We don't wake up today and have the Moog synthesizer. It's built on hundreds and thousands, not hundreds of thousands, but thousands of years of adaptation, specific circumstances, that kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure, 100%. Yeah, I mean, it's all gradual, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and I was kind of curious then, you took class, which class did you take for your capstone, by the way?
It was Humanities 4 with Dr. Giovanni.
Okay.
But it was cut off by Helene. So I felt like he did a great job of accommodating, but I feel like I obviously didn't get as much out of it as I could have. Yeah.
I was wondering, so you've mentioned it a little bit before, and I was going to want to bounce back to that a little bit. You currently work downtown at a music venue. I was wondering if you wanted to speak on that a little more.
Yeah, I work at 2 venues. The first one is the Diana Wortham Theater, which is kind of by Pack Square, by the White Duck downtown. Wonderful place to work. Everyone there is great. I A2 there, which is like the assistant to the main sound engineer, who's the A1, not A1 steak sauce, even though I do love me some A1 steak sauce. But yeah, so I work there, and then I also intern at the Gray Eagle, which is kind of off the River Arts District, which is more of they get touring bands like almost every night there type deal. And I've had the opportunity to work with some pretty cool bands. Yeah, that so far is an internship, and I'm hoping eventually it can open some new doors. And I work my butt off there, super long hours, but it's fun. I mean, it's 100% worth it. It's a great place to be, yeah.
Do you feel like your time at UNCA kind of prepared you?
100%, yeah. And I mean, I wouldn't be there if it wasn't for UNCA. After Helene, I was in a live sound class, and my professor, Professor Perez, took us around to some venues around town. And we visited the Gray Eagle, and after class, I stuck around and talked with the engineer. And I was like, hey, if you ever need any help, like, could I have your email? And at first, they're always a little hesitant because they're like, does this kid just want to see free shows, right, and stuff like that. But I reached out, and I did a couple shadows, and I guess they liked me because they kept me on. So, I mean, I have Professor Perez to thank for that. And for Diana Wortham, I've heard to thank for that as well. And also, it's just like being around the technology, because this stuff ain't cheap, knowing how to work the boards and stuff, 100%. I got those skills by coming to UNCA, yeah.
But you're graduating soon.
Yeah.
How do you
It's a spooky
feel
thing.
about that, about graduating so soon? I mean,
At first, I was a little scared, but I've had to turn down like 2 work opportunities because of class and stuff. And at that point, I was like, yeah, I think I'm ready to graduate.
yeah. It didn't hit me. It didn't hit me that I was graduating till months after the fact.
Yeah.
You still have to process it a little bit. But then I was kind of curious then, do you have, on the subject of graduation, do you have anything to say to music tech students and humanities students? I mean, all those students go through humanities, but
Yeah.
anything you would want to say to music tech students, humanities students that might be watching?
So first, to music tech students, don't say no to anything unless you're busy. Work with everybody. It doesn't matter if it's not music that you don't want to work on. It might not be a concert you particularly care about. You never know what door is going to open through meeting people. I've met some incredible people who've introduced me to some other incredible people who've opened opportunities to play or work sound for. always be attentive and just don't say no if you can help it. To people in humanities classes, which is it still the whole school, or are they cutting that?
I'm not going to say anything on air, but currently we do have 850 odd students in humanities
Okay.
classes right now.
What you learn in humanities and what you choose to learn can be applicable in any class. I mean, if you're in, like, I understand if you're not super interested in maybe the content that you're learning, but it can really, you know, change the way you approach things. Digesting, like, you know, all the literature and the philosophy and all that stuff that is taught, it can be super beneficial in just the way that you kind of approach the world and the way that you kind of carry yourself. I found it very helpful in that regard. And especially in like kind of an arts-driven career like music, you deal with many different types of people. You're put in many precarious situations, and you never know what text is sitting in the back of your mind, or you know what philosophies you learned back there that can help you in certain situations. Yeah, I mean, I just exposing yourself to as much culture and art as you can, I think is just beneficial to everyone, and just understanding the world around you.
Awesome. So we're running out we're running out of time for today. So I just wanted to ask, is there anything else you'd want to say before we close out for today?
Can I plug something?
Yeah, go ahead.
I engineered and mastered a song called "We Will Rise" by Janet Phillips, and it's a benefit for Western North Carolina musicians after Hurricane Helene. There is a GoFundMe. If you're able to donate anything, it's much appreciated, even if you can just check out the song. But all the money is going back to the musicians who've lost job opportunities, lost musical gear and whatnot because of the hurricane. So yeah, if anyone can check that out, we would much appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank you so much, Noah, for your time. It was great meeting you.
Thank you.
And I want to thank everyone for tuning in. And we're done. Woo!
Nice.